All right, let's talk generative AI. There's so much hype out there, it's kind of hard to know where to even start. So today, we're going to build a real strategic guide for using it in your business. Because look, to get the most out of these incredible tools, you need a smart way to make decisions. And that's exactly what we're going to build right now.
So you might be thinking all this Gen AI stuff is pretty much the same, right? You type something in, you get something out. And that's a really common way to look at it. But honestly, treating these models like they're all one interchangeable tool is probably the biggest strategic mistake you can make.
I mean, think about it like this. You've got a toolbox. You wouldn't grab a hammer to turn a screw, right? Yeah, they're both tools, but they're built for totally different jobs. It is the exact same principle with AI. The secret to success is picking the right model, the right architecture for the specific problem you're trying to solve.
Okay, so let's start with the first major job for AI. And that's simply understanding the content you already have. We're not talking about creating anything new just yet, just making sense of all the data and documents that are already there.
This is really the bread and butter for a lot of businesses. Think about automatically figuring out where an incoming email should go, or instantly knowing if customer feedback is positive or negative. Or how about a search that understands what you mean, not just the keywords you typed? Even spotting fraud. These are all understanding tasks.
So, the right tool for this job? It's called an encoder-only model. A great example is Google's famous BERT model. Let's just call these models the analysts. Their superpower is something called bidirectional understanding. That means they read a sentence forwards and backwards at the same time to get the complete, full context before they make a call.
The best way to picture this is to imagine a senior analyst who's been given a super important report. They don't just read it from page 1 to the end. No way. They're flipping back and forth, connecting a number on page 2 with a statement on page 20. They do all that to build a deep, complete picture before they give their final opinion. That is exactly how these models work.
All right, let's switch gears to job number 2. This is the one that gets all the headlines, and for good reason, creating brand new, totally original content from scratch.
This is where AI stops being just an analyst and becomes an author. We're talking about generating a whole financial summary, drafting a personal email to a customer, writing actual software code from a simple sentence, or coming up with some really clever marketing copy.
For this kind of work, you need a totally different tool, a decoder-only model. Think of the GPT family. They're the perfect example. Let's call them the creators. They work by predicting the most likely next word based on all the words that came before it. That's how they build up sentences, paragraphs, you name it. The analogy here is perfect. It's like an eloquent author writing a novel. They write one word at a time, but their genius lies in holding the entire story so far in their head. That memory lets them pick the perfect next word to move the story forward in a way that feels creative and makes total sense. And that brings us to our third core AI job, transforming content. This isn't just about understanding or creating, it's about changing something from one form into a totally different one. You see this kind of stuff every day in business, taking a massive 50-page report and boiling it down to a one-page summary, or translating a document from English to Spanish, or even just converting data from a spreadsheet into a different format, or taking dense, technical jargon and rewriting it in plain, simple language anyone can understand. The specialist for this is the encoder-decoder model. Think Google's T5 model. We can call these the translators. They're pretty clever because they actually combine the first two models we talked about. There's an encoder part that first reads and completely understands the input, and then a decoder part generates a totally new output based on that deep understanding. And the analogy is, well, a human translator. A good one doesn't just swap words one for one. Of course not. First, they listen and fully absorb the meaning, the nuance, the intent of the original sentence. Only after they truly get it do they start to craft the equivalent in the new language. That's what ensures the real message gets across perfectly.
Okay, so we have our 3 distinct jobs and our 3 specialized tools. Let's put this all together into a real, practical blueprint that you can actually start using. But first, a quick word on a newer, really efficient architecture called Mixture of Experts, or MOE. Now, instead of having one huge monolithic model trying to do everything, an MOE has a clever router that looks at your request and sends it to the best, small, specialist submodel for that job. Think of it like a great executive assistant who knows exactly which department head has the answer to any question. It's just incredibly efficient. So when you lay it all out, you get this really clear map.
The encoder-only models, your analysts, are fast and cheap for classification. The decoder-only models, your creators, are super versatile, but they're going to cost you a bit more. The encoder-decoders, the translators, are your mid-cost specialists for any transformation task. And the MoE models, they give you this fantastic bang for your buck, a great balance of performance and cost, especially if you have a lot of different jobs to do.
And this brings us to the most important point, the key takeaway, this simple decision tree. Always start with your business need. Do you need to understand something you already have? Get an analyst. Do you need to create something new? You need a creator. And if you need to transform something from A to B, well, that's a job for a translator. It really is that straightforward.
Because at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. Just having AI, that's not a competitive advantage anymore. Everybody has it. The real edge, the thing that will set you apart, is knowing which tool to use for which job and deploying it with a clear, focused strategy.
So, I'll just leave you with this one final question to think about. Looking at your own work, your own challenges, what's the very first job that you are going to solve now, that you know how to pick the right AI for the job?